The tire blew out with a sound like a gunshot, ripping through the silence of the night and leaving me stranded on a deserted stretch of Willow Creek Road. My heart pounded as I gripped the steering wheel, the car lurching to a stop under the faint glow of a flickering street lamp. At 24, I, Ethan Caldwell, thought I had life figured out, until the universe laughed and left me alone in the dark. With no cell service and a flat tire I had no idea how to fix. I stepped out into the chilly autumn air, my breath visible under the star-streaked Maryland sky. The road was eerily quiet, save for the rustle of leaves skittering across the asphalt. I kicked the deflated tire, cursing my luck. I'd been on my way to a party at my friend Mia's house, a chance to escape the weight of my own thoughts. Thoughts about who I was, who I wanted to be, and the secret I'd buried so deep it felt like a betrayal to even acknowledge it. I wasn't out. Not to my friends, not to my family, not even to myself in the mirror some days. Growing up in a small town like Elmswood, where everyone knew your business, didn't exactly scream safe space for a guy like me, questioning everything. Headlights sliced through the darkness, and I squinted as a beat-up pickup truck rolled to a stop. My stomach knotted. Stranded on a rural road at 11 p.m. wasn't the ideal time for a stranger to show up. But when the driver stepped out, I recognized the broad shoulders and salt and pepper beard immediately. It was Mia's dad, Robert Navarro, a 48-year-old single father who ran a local auto shop and had a reputation for fixing more than just cars. His warm brown eyes crinkled as he smiled, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows despite the cold. "Ethan, that you?" he called, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "Heard from Mia you were headed over. Looks like you hit some bad luck." I let out a shaky laugh, relief flooding me. "Yeah, Mr. Navarro, you could say that. Tires toast and I'm useless out here." "Call me Robert," he said, grabbing a toolbox from the truck bed. "And don't worry, I've seen worse. Let's get you back on the road." As he knelt by the car, his hands moving with practiced ease, I couldn't help but notice the quiet strength in him. Robert was the kind of man who made you feel safe without trying. His presence steady like the oak trees lining the street. We made small talk about Mia, the shop, the crisp fall weather. But there was something in the air, an undercurrent I couldn't name. Maybe it was the way his gaze lingered a fraction too long when I handed him a wrench, or how his calloused fingers brushed mine, sending a jolt through me I didn't expect. "You don't strike me as the party type," Robert said, glancing up as he tightened the spare tire. "What's got you driving out this late?" I shrugged, leaning against the car to hide my nerves. "Just needed a change of pace. Mia's good at dragging me out of my shell." He chuckled, a sound that warmed the chilly night. "She's good at that. But you seem like you've got a lot on your mind, Ethan. More than just a flat tire." His words hit harder than they should have. I looked away, my throat tight. How did he see through me so easily? I barely knew him, yet here he was, peeling back layers I'd spent years building. "Maybe," I muttered, kicking a pebble. "Life's complicated sometimes." Robert stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "It is. But sometimes, the things that scare us most are the ones worth facing." He paused, his eyes soft but searching. "You ever feel like you're running from something?" My breath caught. He didn't know, couldn't know, but it felt like he was staring straight into my soul. I nodded, unable to speak, and in that moment, under the flickering street lamp, something shifted. It wasn't just about the tire anymore. The night stretched on as Robert insisted on following me to Mia's to make sure I got there safely. The party was in full swing when we arrived, music spilling from the house, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the real moment had happened out there on the road. Mia greeted me with a hug, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "You okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Yeah," I lied, my eyes drifting to Robert as he chatted with her on the porch. He caught my gaze, and for a split second the world narrowed to just us. My heart raced, not with fear, but with something new, something dangerous and alive. As the night wore on, I found myself gravitating toward Robert. He was easy to talk to, his stories about the shop and his life laced with a quiet wisdom that drew me in. He'd been married once, he told me, but it hadn't worked out. Sometimes you think you know who you are, he said, sipping a beer. But life has a way of showing you different. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words stuck. Instead, I laughed and changed the subject, but his words lingered. By the time I left the party, my head was spinning. Not from the drinks, but from the weight of what I was starting to feel. Robert offered to check my car again before I drove home, and as we stood in the driveway, the air between us crackled. "Ethan," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here." I nodded, my chest tight with unspoken words. As I drove away, his silhouette in my rearview mirror, I knew something had changed. The flat tire wasn't just a stroke of bad luck. It was the start of something I wasn't sure I was ready for. The next morning, I woke with Robert's words echoing in my head. Sometimes the things that scare us most are the ones worth facing. I stared at the ceiling of my tiny Elmswood apartment, the weight of them pressing against my chest. I'd spent years dodging the truth about myself, hiding behind casual friendships and late-night drives to nowhere. But last night had cracked something open. I dragged myself to the local coffee shop, desperate for caffeine and clarity. The place was buzzing with the usual Sunday crowd. Families, hipsters, and old-timers swapping stories over steaming mugs. I ordered a black coffee and sank into a corner booth, trying to make sense of the warmth I'd felt standing next to Robert. It wasn't just gratitude for his help. It was more. And that terrified me. My phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Hey, you seemed off last night. Everything okay? Dad said you had a rough time with the car." I typed and deleted a response 3 times before settling on a vague, "Yeah, just tired. Thanks for checking." I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. Not when I barely understood it myself. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see Robert walk in. My heart did a traitorous flip. He was in a navy sweater, his beard neatly trimmed, and he carried himself with that same steady confidence. He spotted me and waved, his smile disarming. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, holding a steaming cup. "Please," I said, gesturing to the seat across from me, my voice steadier than I felt. He slid into the booth, and for a moment we just sat there, the hum of the coffee shop wrapping around us like a cocoon. "Feeling better after last night?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, clutching my mug. "Thanks to you. I'd probably still be out there cursing at that tire if you hadn't shown up." He laughed, a sound that eased the knot in my chest. "Happy to help. Though I gotta say, you looked like you were carrying more than a flat tire last night." There it was again, that uncanny ability to see through me. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the mug. "Maybe I was," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been stuck, I guess, trying to figure things out." Robert leaned forward, his expression soft but serious. "Figuring yourself out is the hardest kind of work. Takes courage. But you don't have to do it alone, Ethan." His words hit like a punch, and I felt tears prick my eyes. I blinked them away, embarrassed, but Robert didn't push. Instead, he told me about his own life, how he'd grown up in a conservative family in Texas, how he'd spent years denying parts of himself to fit in. "I was married to Mia's mom for a decade," he said quietly. "Loved her, but not the way she deserved. Took me a long time to admit I was gay. Longer still to live it." My breath caught. Gay. The word hung between us, heavy and real. I'd suspected, maybe even hoped, but hearing it out loud made my pulse race. "How did you know?" I asked, my voice shaking. He smiled, a little sad, a little wistful. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 little ones. Moments when I stopped lying to myself. Like the first time I let myself feel something for someone and didn't run from it. I wanted to ask who, when, how, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said, I don't know if I'm brave enough for that. You are, he said firmly. You just don't know it yet. The rest of the conversation blurred. Stories about his shop, my job at the local bookstore, mundane things that felt profound because of who we were to each other in that moment. When we parted ways, he pressed a business card into my hand. For the shop, he said, but his eyes said something else. Or, if you need me. I spent the next few days in a haze, replaying our conversation. I started noticing things. How my heart raced when I passed his auto shop, how I scanned every crowd for his face. I wasn't just grateful for his help anymore. I was falling for him, and it scared the hell out of me. By Wednesday, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to Navarro's auto, my palms sweaty as I parked. The shop was a small, cluttered space, filled with the smell of oil and the clank of tools. Robert was under a car, his legs sticking out, and I almost lost my nerve. But then he slid out, saw me, and grinned. Ethan, what's up? Tire trouble again? No, I said, my voice unsteady. I just wanted to talk. His expression softened, and he wiped his hands on a rag. Let's take a walk, he said, leading me out back to a small lot where old cars sat rusting under the sun. We sat on the tailgate of a pickup, the air thick with the scent of gasoline and possibility. I don't know what I'm doing, I blurted out. I think I might be. I couldn't say it. Not yet. Robert didn't push. He just sat there, his shoulder close to mine, his presence steady. You don't have to have it all figured out, he said. Just take it one step at a time. I looked at him, really looked at him. The lines around his eyes, the warmth in his smile, and something inside me broke free. I reached for his hand, tentative, and when his fingers closed around mine, it felt like coming home. Holding Robert's hand felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly right. The world didn't end. No one pointed and stared. It was just us, sitting on that rusty tailgate, the Maryland sun dipping low and painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. But inside, I was a mess of fear and hope, the weight of my unspoken truth pressing harder than ever. I've never done this, I admitted, my voice barely audible. Not with anyone. Not like this. Robert's thumb brushed over my knuckles, a small gesture that sent warmth flooding through me. There's no rush, Ethan. No right or wrong way to feel what you're feeling. But there was a wrong way, wasn't there? Elmswood wasn't exactly a haven for queer folks. I'd heard the whispers, seen the looks when two guys got too close at the diner. And Mia, what would she think if she knew I was falling for her dad? The thought twisted my stomach, but I couldn't let go of Robert's hand. Not yet. Over the next week, we found excuses to see each other. Coffee at the shop, lunch at a food truck by the river, late-night talks in his truck parked outside my apartment. Each moment felt stolen, precious, like we were building something fragile but real. Robert was patient, never pushing, but his presence was a constant pull, drawing me toward a version of myself I'd been too scared to face. One night, as we sat in his truck, the radio playing softly, I told him about my family, how my dad left when I was 10, how my mom worked double shifts to keep us afloat, how I'd learned to keep my head down and my feelings locked away. I've always felt different, I said, staring at the dashboard. But I didn't know what to do with it, so I just didn't. Robert listened, his hand resting on the seat between us, close but not touching. I know that feeling, he said. Took me years to stop hiding. Even after I came out, I worried about Mia, about what people would say. But living a lie, it eats you up. I nodded, my throat tight. I'm scared, I admitted, of what this means, of what happens if I let myself want this. He turned to me, his eyes steady. You're allowed to want, Ethan. You're allowed to be happy. The words broke something in me, and before I could think, I leaned across the seat and kissed him. It was clumsy, desperate, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. But when he kissed me back, soft and sure, it felt like the world finally made sense. For the first time, I wasn't running. The next morning, reality crashed in. Mia called, her voice bright and oblivious. Hey, you've been weirdly busy lately. Want to grab lunch today? I froze, guilt twisting in my gut. I hadn't told her about Robert, about us, whatever us was. I mumbled an excuse, but her silence on the other end told me she wasn't buying it. That afternoon, I went to the shop, needing to see Robert, needing to know this wasn't a mistake. He was working on a car, his sleeves rolled up, grease smudged on his cheek. When he saw me, his face lit up, but I couldn't shake the dread pooling in my stomach. We need to talk about Mia, I said, my voice low. She's my best friend. If she finds out. Robert's expression sobered. I know. I've been thinking about that too. She deserves to know, but it's your call, Ethan. This is new for you. I don't want to push you into anything. I wanted to tell him it wasn't just about Mia. It was about me, about the fear of being seen, of being judged, of losing the only family I had left in this town. But before I could say anything, the shop door swung open, and Mia walked in. Ethan? She said, her eyes narrowing as she looked between us. What's going on? My heart stopped. Robert stepped forward, calm as ever. Just helping Ethan with his car again, he said. But his voice was too steady, too careful. Mia's gaze lingered on me, and I saw the question in her eyes. She wasn't stupid. She knew something was up. Right? She said slowly. Well, I'll catch you later, Ethan. She left, and the air felt heavier than before. Robert put a hand on my shoulder, but I pulled away, my mind racing. I can't do this, I whispered. Not yet. He didn't argue, didn't push. I'm here when you're ready, he said, and the sadness in his voice cut deeper than I expected. I spent the next few days avoiding him, avoiding Mia, avoiding myself. But the truth was catching up, and I knew I couldn't outrun it forever. The silence was suffocating. I hadn't spoken to Robert or Mia in days, and every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, expecting a confrontation I wasn't ready for. I buried myself in work at the bookstore, shelving novels and dodging questions from coworkers about why I looked like I hadn't slept in a week. But no amount of distraction could quiet the ache in my chest. The pull toward Robert, the guilt over Mia, the fear of what it all meant. One evening, I was closing up the shop when Mia showed up. She didn't knock, just stood outside the glass door, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. I let her in, my stomach churning. We need to talk, she said, her voice sharp but not angry. You've been avoiding me, Ethan, and I know it's not just about your car. I froze, my hands fumbling with the keys. Mia, don't lie to me, she cut in, her eyes searching mine. I saw the way you looked at my dad, and the way he looked at you. Something's going on, isn't it? The truth clawed its way up my throat, but I couldn't speak. I nodded, my face burning, and braced for her to yell, to walk away, to hate me. Instead, she sighed and sat on the edge of a display table, her shoulders slumping. I'm not mad, she said quietly. I'm confused. Dad's been different lately, happier, but guarded. And you've been a ghost. Just tell me what's happening, Ethan. Please. I took a shaky breath and told her everything. The flat tire, the late-night talks, the kiss in the truck. I told her how I'd spent years hiding who I was, how meeting Robert had changed everything, how I was terrified of losing her. By the time I finished, my voice was raw, and tears were streaming down my face. Mia was quiet for a long moment, her expression softening. "You're my best friend," she said finally. "And I love my dad. If this is real, I'm not going to stand in the way. But you have to be honest with me, and with yourself." I nodded, relief and fear crashing together. "I'm trying," I whispered. "I'm just scared." She hugged me then, fierce and tight, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. "You don't have to do this alone," she said, echoing her dad's words. "But you need to talk to him." That night, I drove to Robert's house, my heart in my throat. He answered the door in a worn t-shirt, his eyes tired but warm. "Ethan," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "I was worried about you." We sat in his living room, the space cozy and cluttered with photos of Mia and old car magazines. I told him about my conversation with Mia, about the fear that still gripped me, about how much he meant to me. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted, "but I don't want to lose you." He reached for my hand, his touch steadying me. "You won't," he said, "but you need to decide what you want, Ethan. Not just for me, but for you." I kissed him then, not out of desperation but out of certainty. It was slow, deliberate, a promise to myself as much as to him. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, and for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The next few weeks were a blur of small, brave steps. I came out to my mom, who cried but held me tight and said she just wanted me to be happy. I started going to a local LGBTQ support group, where I met others who'd walked the same rocky path. And Robert. Robert was there through it all, patient and steady, his love a quiet anchor. But Elmswood wasn't always kind. Whispers followed us. Gossip at the diner, sideways glances at the shop. One night, someone slashed Robert's tires, leaving a hateful note under his wiper. The word stung, but he didn't flinch. "This isn't new," he said, tossing the note in the trash. "And it's not bigger than us." I wanted to believe him, but the fear lingered. Was this what it meant to live openly? To love openly? The answer came in the small moments. Robert's hand in mine, Mia's teasing grin, the way the world kept turning despite the hate. I was learning to be brave one day at a time. Spring came to Elmswood, and with it a tentative hope. Robert and I were building something real, something worth fighting for. We'd go on drives, just the two of us, exploring back roads and talking about everything. Our fears, our dreams, the life we wanted together. Mia, true to her word, was our biggest supporter, throwing herself into planning a community event at the shop to raise money for a local LGBTQ youth center. "If we're gonna live loud," she said, grinning, "let's do it right." But the hate didn't vanish. The slashed tires weren't the last of it. Graffiti appeared on the shop one morning, ugly words scrawled in red paint. Robert cleaned it up without a word, but I saw the strain in his eyes. "This is my home," he told me later, his voice low. "I've fought worse battles than this, but I hate that you're caught in it." I shook my head, taking his hand. "I'm not caught. I'm here because I choose to be." The turning point came at the community event. The shop was packed. Locals, friends, even a few curious strangers drawn by Mia's flyers. Robert and I stood side by side, greeting people, our hands brushing but not quite touching. I was nervous, my palms sweaty, but every smile, every kind word, chipped away at the fear. Then a man I recognized from the diner, a regular with a loud voice and a mean streak, stepped forward. "Didn't expect this from you, Navarro," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. The crowd hushed, and my stomach dropped. Robert didn't flinch. "Expect what?" he said calmly. Me fixing cars? Helping kids? Loving who I love? The man sneered, but before he could speak, Mia stepped in. If you've got a problem, take it somewhere else, she said, her voice fierce. This is a place for community, not hate. To my surprise, the crowd murmured in agreement. A woman I didn't know clapped, then another, and soon the shop was filled with applause. The man stormed out and I felt something shift. Not just in me, but in the air. Elmswood wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and we weren't alone. That night, after the event, Robert and I sat on the tailgate of his truck, the same one from that first night. The stars were out, bright and endless, and I leaned against him, his arm around my shoulders. I was so scared, I admitted, not just of the hate, but of all of this, of being me. I know, he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. But you're doing it, and you're doing it beautifully. I looked at him, my heart full. You changed my life, you know? That flat tire, it wasn't just bad luck. It was the start of everything. He smiled, his eyes crinkling. Funny how life works. Sometimes it takes a breakdown to find where you're meant to be. We sat there, wrapped in each other and the quiet of the night, and I knew he was right. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There'd be more whispers, more battles, but I wasn't running anymore. I'd found my home, not just in Elmswood, but in Robert, in Mia, in the person I was finally becoming. The flat tire had been the start, but the journey, that was ours to make together.